Hello folks, today I'm going to be taking a look at the second starter set for Deadzone 3rd edition by Mantic Games, the Fall of Omega VII. Okay, so this is the new Deadzone 2-player starter set, Fall of Omega VII, for 3rd edition. This is the second of the 3rd edition boxes. As you can see, that's what you get inside, everything you need to play your Sci-Fi Skirmish game. I'm going to start with the papery bits. First off, we have force list book. So the force lists starts with explaining how you build your strike team and choose your units. Then we get the actual list themselves. So Asterians, Enforcers, Forge Fathers, GCPS, Marauders, Maison, Nameless, Plague, Rebs, and Vermin. Building a force is relatively simple. You may only have one leader. You have no limits on troops. However, for every troop you can take one specialist, and you can take one support for every 3 troops. Living legends, you generally have a symbol or a little bracketed 1 after them. You can only have 1, and equipment is limited in your force list. So you get this very simple list building structure. Leaders are important in Deadzone because they come with different tactical options. So for example, the Overseer has combat team training, energy shield, recon, and tactician, but they have this wheels within wheels where they can discard any one of their opponent's command dice once per activation. So the leader you pick will change how some aspects of your force work. So if you've got a very melee heavy army, having a leader that has a special ability that moves people or provides cover or stealth is probably better than building a force with a lot of melee weapons and then having a leader that gives you a bonus to shoot actions. So that's the sort of thing you're thinking about when you build your list, bringing the right leader for the job. At the end of each section, you get the equipment list, giving you the points value and the limit. So some of these limits change depending on the faction that you're building. And then you finish off with a nice little color spread of the various models and weapons so you can tell who is what. Which if you haven't played before and you're looking at a sprue, knowing what a comms relay and what a cloaking device is for a support drone is probably handy. Each section also starts with a nice bit of background for them. All of the stats are laid out the same way, so if we go to a troop and specialist section here, your basic stat line is up here. This remains the same for all Enforcer operatives. Base size, speed, they move in cubes. So 1 for short action, 2 for long action. Their score they need on a dice on a ranged attack. Same for fight. Their save, armor if they have any, how many hit points they have, and the size, because that limits how many models can go into a cube. And then underneath, you have the weapons. So they're all Enforcer operatives. If you take a troop, they can have any of these weapons. So laser rifle, incinerator, or thermal rifle. And then it gives you the range and AP and any special abilities or keywords. How many victory points your opponent gets and their cost. However, if you take a burst laser, a missile launcher, or a sniper rifle, they count as a specialist. So you can only have one of these for every troop. And likewise down here, the engineer and medic are the same. So the loadout changes whether it's a troop or a specialist or sometimes support model as well. Otherwise, you just build to the points. It's relatively simple. There is an app from Mantic. If you like using those sort of things, it's browser based, although I believe you can also get it on your phone and stuff as well. Shows you how much I use them. It's free, but you're limited in how many lists you can save. There are various paid versions as well. If you play more Mantic Games, then getting the subscription makes more sense because you've got access to all of them, including the living rulebook. So that's handy. So once you've got your list built, you'll need your rules. Rulebook is smaller. The force list is about 125 pages. Our rulebook is only, he said, flicking to the back to check, about 83. Full colour throughout, very well laid out. Rules themselves are relatively short, so after you've skipped the what you need to play and what this book is about, your rules section is 15 pages, and that's all of the basic rules, and then additional rules and keywords come in after, and then your last chunk of the book, the last third, is scenarios, background and campaign games. So you don't need to worry about it being a very rules heavy game. In fact, you've only two types of dice, a command dice and a D8, and you never modify the number you require. So an assault enforcer fighting will always need a 4, 5 or 6. 4, 5, 6, 7 or 8 on a dice to hit. 8s explode and you get to roll another dice, which is great because if you've got any modifiers, you add or subtract from the number of dice you use. So generally people will start with a test, which is nearly always 3 dice. But if you've got a bonus for charging, you'll get a 4th dice. If your opponent is wounded, you'll get a 5th dice, and so on. So you never have to worry about modifying numbers. You just add or subtract dice. So that's always handy. If I go into here, you see all the rules are laid out very nicely with plenty of explanations for what the various actions are, what you can do, the command dice, the symbols on them, those special orders I was talking about, which change depending on your faction and your faction's leader. So having a commander or a backup commander is always handy. So those are the main books. After that, we have a set of tokens. So these are nicely protected in a little poly pocket. So at the bottom we have the green ones that are used for objectives. They have different victory points depending on whether they're front and back. So different scenarios will help you out there. We have ammo / equipment that you can pick up. We have wound markers. We have victory point trackers. So whenever you take out somebody who's worth a victory point or 2 or 3, you can stack these to one side so you know what's going on. And then these are for showing who's activated and who hasn't. And the usual sort of smoke and flame and stuff like that if somebody's been set on fire. I believe you can get acrylic versions of these as well. But a nice 2mm cardstock. Now, if this is your first rodeo and those books look a bit extensive, there are 2 bits of kit in this starter set and in the other starter set as well, the Veerman starter set, which I think are absolutely fantastic. First off, getting started. There are no build instructions in the kits themselves, which we'll take a look at in a minute. Instead, they're in this getting started part. So it's color coded. You see here the blue weapons are colored and numbered. So those are actually specialist weapons, and then these are optional parts. So they do that for both the Asterians and the Plague. And then there's also a bit about the assembling your terrain, which you can clip together and unclip, or you can glue it solid if you want to glue it solid. These make your battle zones. But for your first game, it suggests building these specific miniatures. So 2 marionettes, a regular, a specialist, and then a support drone with no rifles that also counts as a troop. And then over here we have Plague Hound, Plague Zombie, and Stage 3A Ghoul with rifle. So these are all troops. And then here's the setup they want you to go with. So you get a mat in the box set, a paper mat. Deadzone is played on a grid of 3-inch cubes, and the mat is 8 by 8. That is your standard. And on one side you have exactly that, but on the other side you have this. So this obviously is just a section. But what they've done is take that Let's Play and mark everything out on the mat. So it tells you where to put an objective. These black lines are where you put specific terrain pieces or scatter, so that you can have all of those on there. And then around the outside, it tells you what the scenario is. It tells you when you gain VPs, how you claim objectives. It has the stat lines on one side for the Asterians, and then on the other side for the Plague. So you don't have to reference any books. Everything you need to reference is around the outside of this mat. And it's still only on the 2 foot by 2 foot playing area. So it's really handy for learning the game. You just set your ghoul, zombie, and then hellhound, your dog, in these corners, and then you have at the Asterians on the other side. And this, I think, is a genius way of introducing people to skirmish games. There are no measuring sticks or anything like that, because all movement and ranges are just counted based on these cubes, with the larger number of cubes if you have elevation. So if you have to go up 3 cubes and then go out 1, it's a range of 3. If you have to go out 2 cubes and up 1, it's a range of 2. So you're never having to worry too much about it. Where you put a model within an area is entirely up to you. So if I have my little zombie there and somebody was here, he's clearing the open. I could, however, have started him there. If you overlap a cube, you just have to nominate where he is. So the majority is in this. He's going to actually be in this cube, but I can tuck him around that corner to get a bit of blocking terrain there to protect him. So very good setup as far as the paper stuff goes. Let's have a look at some of the plastic toys. Okay, so starting with the buildings, there are 7 bags of terrain tiles. Each bag contains 4 tile pieces, generally. I said generally because some of them contain alternative bits. So this one still contains the 4, but also has some support struts. This contains only 3 squares, but also a hatch and a barricade. It's a mix of stuff from the Mantic terrain crate range. So like I say, 7 bags, on average 4 pieces per bag. Let's set those out of the way. You also get 2 bags of connector clips, which are either 180 or 90 degree connectors for building your walls and bits and pieces. And then there are several bags of scatter. So these contain tanks, tubes, street lights, railings, buttresses, scrap, and then some of the newer pieces, so street signs, awnings, and recycling, ATMs, stuff like that. I go through it in more detail in the first unboxing I did for the 3rd edition set. However, I will show you a couple of things you can build. So all of these are 3-inch by 3-inch cubes, or if you want that in metric, 75 mil square. Like I say, sometimes you get half pieces, sometimes you get ruined pieces, and sometimes you get barricades, but then you can make up a whole host of things. I found on average you're going to be using 3.5 pieces per cube, which means with 7 bags of 4 is 28. Divide that by 3. You're going to be making 6 or 7 cubes. If you're making whole cubes, you'll obviously need more. But, for example, here I've got 3 cubes on one side, or 3 pieces on one side of a cube, 4 pieces on the other, and then when set together, they form a stable enough platform. Obviously, I've just quickly clipped these. If you want them to stay in that position, you're going to glue them. If you want to break them down every time, you can. This is a neat little bit. The door pops in and out of the top. And Deadzone is very much a game where you're looking for line of sight and small areas that people can get through. Be it hatches, or I'm not sure if I've glued that hatch down or not. He said, oh, there we go. Hatches that they can climb out through. So you can leave some of these open in one game and then seal them up in another to block entryways and access. But if you think about it, if you're making 6 or 7 little cubes, and then you can start stacking them or combining them into larger buildings to change the shape and layout of your table, which is really nice. Pop that out of the way. Some of the scatter then. You've got these little odd crates. They've got nice detail on them. Some of the stuff is pre-clipped. Well, all of the stuff in the train crate is pre-clipped off sprues. So depending on how rambunctious whoever's been doing the clipping is, you may find that you've got some more to clip off, or occasionally something to fill in. Generally, they're not too bad. There are some nice solid pieces as well. And they just add differences to your tabletop. So, you know, these could be stacked up in various ways, or I've seen people glue multiple ones together and then put them onto pallets. But it's a nice look. The new bits and pieces, though, are really lovely. Things like the recycling bin, or the ATM, or if you've got some of the other train crate stuff, you can even get little Dreadball arcade games, which I think is just great. And again, when you're just adding them to a cube in limited amounts, just to give models something to hide behind, then you have stuff like this. So our Happy Noodle Bar, sort of calamari. Hopefully it's not one of the nameless. It might be one of the nameless running it, mind you. And these have the same connectors, so they would just plug onto the front of a building into something like that. Obviously, if it goes between 2 sections, it's better. But there are even vertical signs. I say this is a vertical sign. It could just as easily be a horizontal sign across the top. Again, giving you a bit of cover to hide behind. So that's the terrain side of things. Plenty in there for a starter set. Plenty in there for most of your games, to be brutally honest. Although I imagine if you're anything like me, you'll start expanding on that. There's one of the little rubble pieces put together with some brickwork and girders. Nice chunky bit of kit just for blocking. You also get your D8, so a set of 8 D8, and then the command dice that you roll depending on the tactician level of your commander. They may get more or fewer of these, or if you've got a couple of people, you may be able to spam things together if somebody else has got tactician as a backup. But they give you things like an extra dice, an additional move, an extra fight, the special symbol, obviously, extra shoot. So activate an extra model. And these can be played out of sequence. So you do your action, then spend one of these to activate again, interrupting your opponent's turn, which again can change things up from the sort of the standard I go, you go. Right, let's take a look at some of the miniatures. Okay, starting off with the Plague then. You get 2 sprues of zombies, which are here. Zombies are terrible. Some have guns, they don't really know how to use them. The Plague has various levels, and depending on how low down the pecking order you are, you have less of your intelligence. So these are more animalistic. But as you can see, there are a set of 5 legs. You've got several more torsos, although some of them are 2-part, like this one. And then you have a variety of arms and a few different heads, some helmeted, some not, some screaming. So it's lab techs, soldiers, citizens, that type of thing. So 10 of those, and you can build them up into a range of animalistic victims. They are particularly nice. I like them. I like the soldier who remembers that guns do something but can't remember what. He'd be doing as much damage if he went in with a shovel. And then this guy who is either tearing himself apart or trying to stuff extra into his gullet. The Plague may be biological, maybe nanotech. Who knows how it started? Maison Labs, we're looking at you. But these are a swarm, essentially, in game. Height-wise, they are 30 mil to eye level. So, and build-wise, very simple. You know, torsos into legs, and then occasional arms and heads as you see fit. So there's a fair bit of variation with them. And they look decent enough, nice level of detail on them. And the mold lines / seam lines aren't too bad. So we like the zombies. Next up are our stage 3s. These are a bit more cunning, bit more humanity retained, if I can say that, because not everything that gets plagued is human. You can see here there are 4 torsos, about 8 heads, 6, yeah, 8 heads, a couple of dog heads, one with a separate lower jaw. You can see labelled up with letters, so head B, jaw B. Likewise, some of the arms will be labelled as well, so D needs to go with the D arm because it's a 2-piece. So still a lot of options. Some are restricted in how you build. They also have special weapons. So we have our laser rifles, but we also have a flamer and a grenade launcher, as well as a mortar down here. No legs. Legs and the last body come in a separate bag, and that also makes 5 plus a dog. So here's the little dog. So the hellhounds are really nice, or disgusting depending on your point of view. The fact you get 1 per 5 plagues is good anyway. Saves having to get additional from somewhere else. There's sort of a bonus trip on the sprue. And points wise, they sit between the 3A and the zombies. Doggo is about 33 mil long and only 20 mil to the top of his head. And then we have our mortar 3-piece section. You have a set of bins and a mortar shell on the sprue being loaded, so you can do a little mortar team as a support option, or just go gung-ho. So here we have our grenade launcher, and then variety of plague running. These guys can still use weapons, so they're your support. Only 5 in the set, including this ossifer, which is kind of cool. They are substantially bigger. You are looking about 35 mil to eye level, so they're kind of cool. And then there's also a resin stage 3A general as your leader. He went together quite nicely. If you're not used to using resin, you'll need to wash it in soapy water first. And if some of the sprue gates are particularly big, you'll probably want to warm it up before you snip through them to watch out for anything accidentally breaking if it gets a bit brittle. He does come with a little case that he can stand on. I chose not to put it on the base. I'm not a fan of foot-on thing, but that is the plague side. I'll be right back with the Asterians. Okay, so the Asterians or Asterians, depending on how you choose to say it, you get 2 sprues bagged, which gets 5 marionettes plus a drone. So again, the marionettes themselves come in a little bag. It's 1 single piece torso and legs. So all you're adding is shoulders and arms and a head. Don't worry, the shoulders are these big flared things. There are a couple of things to note. So drone build. Some pieces of the drone, here you can see, labelled BCD. You can make a troop-based drone with weapons, or 2 support drones, comms relay and a cloaking device. So depending on the one you build, you may find that you may only need all the Bs or all the Cs, but like I say, some parts are multi-use and you'll need them for any build. Flight stand is built onto the sprue, and then the drone armor is mostly at the bottom. We have a sniper rifle down here for your marionette, one of the special weapons, and also one of the feet, or rather the toes. There's one that is at an angle that just needs these toes put on. Otherwise, your no rifles, and then separate arms are up the top here. And then we have sort of a backpack for either the leader to make your marionette prime, or for the flamer-based fulgator weapon. We have a grenade launcher, and we have that flame-based weapon here. Now, all of the special weapons are A's, so you can only make 1 because you've only got 1 A left hand, unless you magnetize the weapon arms, which there is room to do on the build. Again, nice set of models, well cast. They are fairly upright. This one I've made into a prime. It's got additional little winged flanges on its shoulder pads and extra bits on its helm. It also has more eyes, or whatever they're supposed to be, lenses, because these are controlled remotely. Generally, they are, after all, marionettes. As you can see, some with no rifles and 1 with the grenade launcher. The shoulder pads are flat joins, so there's nothing to locate them, so you'll have a bit of wiggle room with them. However, they are flat to flat, so you just glue them on, and then you've got ball socket joints for the arms, so no real issues putting them together. Some slight seam lines on the bodies that I haven't cleaned up yet, because obviously they're cast in one piece. They're not massively noticeable, but they are there. Depending on how you paint, you may want to take a bit more time cleaning them up. Height-wise, to their lens, they are 32 mil, so quite tall. You will need to make one of them as a marionette prime to be your leader. Unlike the Plague, they don't have a resin leader. we also have, I've made up one of the little gun drones. So this is a troop. And these are lovely little bits of kit. Sort of floating around, hovering, causing people issues. The Asterians don't really like to get involved if they can avoid it, with the exception of the Kalishi. They'd much rather let their technology do their fighting for them, which is eminently sensible as far as I'm concerned. These are 40 mil tall from ground up as far as the floating goes. Obviously that may change if you've got the aerials on your communication one, or you've got the slightly shorter cloaking device one. But twin set of guns, so little tiny guns down front and then bigger guns up top. So yeah, lovely, unique looking set of plastics. 10 of, so 1 leader leaves you with 9 to either be troops or specialists. You also get a Matsudan, so these are a lizard-like race. Think space samurai lizards or space sumo lizards. They first appeared in Dreadball. This is Otto Shura, I think. Big gun, long range ion gun. He also has a couple of special rules. One is he can't be knocked out of a square. So things with knockback or smash or stuff like that would do damage and then push it won't affect it because he's solid. However, he also has honourable, so he won't fire at pinned targets, which is a bit of a shame. Again, resin, relatively easy to put together. I had slight problems with this arm. If you fit it flush, then it won't reach the gun. The gun glues around the handle where my thumb is there. So I would glue the gun straight first and then locate the upper arm via that handle he's grabbing and then let it trail back up. So you'll have a slight gap, but when it's painted you won't be able to see it. Lovely bit of resin there. But I've still not finished clean up yet. The spikes around the top had little sort of square sprue gates. You can see one right there. They need to be trimmed off carefully because otherwise you'll lose that samurai-like collar on it. He is around 32 mil to eye level as well. So each side gets resin. This one happens to be a living legend. I suppose he might actually be a leader. I need to double check. I've not played Asterians before. But overall, really nice kit. Starter sets. Often when you get them, the biggest problem you have is there's not enough for a proper game, shall we say. Which means that your starter set might have the rules in it, and then a few models, but you're going to have to go out and buy a lot. I did a quick points value. Don't hold me to this, because like I say, it's a very quick, back of the cigarette packet kind of look. But the Asterians come in around about 140 points without upgrades. The Plague come in around about 140 points without upgrades. If you start dropping in things like the mortar or some of the special weapons, then you're going to be adding a few more points. A small learning game of Deadzone is about 100. A regular game is about 150. And then a sort of a bigger game, or once you get into playing it, because you can play it relatively quickly, 200 points would be sort of the main cap. So as far as starter sets go, this gives you ample miniatures to play, not just a beginning set of games, but a decent standard game for a long time before you even have to worry about what you're going to change, what you're going to add. So it's a good, solid set with two very different forces as well. So you've got your melee heavy shooty Plague, and then there's the Asterians, who are I wouldn't say weak, but expendable, potentially. Good at shooting. If they get hit up close, they're probably going to come apart. So you need to sort of fire and maneuver. But the Asterians have a linked function where when one activates, another within, I think, 2 cubes can also activate to fire, but doesn't count as activating. So you can sort of chain gunfire with your Asterian marionettes. So it allows you to fire, maneuver, and back off and get that weight of fire down to deal with people. But there we have it, the Fall of Omega VII. There we have it. Another fantastic starter set by Mantic, it has to be said. And also nice that they've varied up not just the races, but the style of gameplay that you'll see. So the first Deadzone box set had your Veerman and your GCPS. This obviously takes a very different look at things with the Asterians and the Plague in there. So you've got a lot of variation that you can do. Interesting choices that you can make when it comes to starting as well. So you've got a very shooty or close combat based army. And in both sets, you've got 4 very different tactical styles because of the commanders. So it means if you're planning on jumping in, either of these sets are great. It's just a case of finding which sort of nation or race or army you want to pick from, really. So it's definitely worth checking them out. The box is absolutely jam full of stuff, and it's another big step forward by Mantic as far as I'm concerned. So let me know what you think below if you've played Deadzone. And if you haven't, will you be jumping in with the Fall of Omega VII? Until next time, bye-bye.
Go ahead and check out our other content on screen now. And while you're at it, why not hit subscribe and remember to ding our dong. Go on, you know you want to click it. Go on.